What if the orcs from Warhammer 40,000 appeared in the real world? What exactly are these creatures? How plausible are they? And how could humanity in the 21st century possibly deal with them on Earth? That's what I'll try to find out in today's video. You're watching the Quirky Codex, and let's begin. If a species resembling the orcs ever appeared in our world, in terms of their biology and life cycle, we'd be absolutely screwed. Orcs aren't just dumb, green-skinned, aggressive brutes, although to be fair, they are that too, but they're also something much more terrifying, a pinnacle of organic life, or at least something close to it. These green-skinned creatures combine traits from 3 different biological kingdoms: fungi, plants, and animals. From fungi, they inherited the ability to reproduce via spores. From plants, photosynthesis, meaning they can convert inorganic matter into organic energy using sunlight. And from animals, their humanoid anatomy and physical form, making them look like some sort of ape-like being, capable of adapting and shaping their environment just like humans do. This combination gives orcs the advantages of all 3 kingdoms, a terrifying evolutionary cocktail. Luckily, the natural appearance of such a life form seems practically impossible. I honestly can't imagine what kind of evolutionary path could lead to something like an orc. Apparently, the creators of Warhammer 40,000 understood this too. That's why, according to the lore, orcs were artificially engineered by ancient, godlike beings. These beings also created the Eldar, basically space elves, and a number of other alien races. So if orcs ever do show up here on Earth and they didn't come from space, just know it was almost certainly someone's genetic experiment gone horribly wrong. And just how dangerous the consequences of such an experiment could be, you're about to find out. In Warhammer 40,000, orcs are genetically designed in such a way that their future role or specialization is pre-programmed into their genome. For example, mech boys are born knowing how to build machines, pain boys act as medics, and war bosses are natural-born military leaders. Humans, for better or worse, don't work that way. We aren't born with predetermined professions, which means we have the freedom to learn new skills or change our specialization at any point in life. Now, at the very beginning of an orc's life cycle, when it still exists as a spore, it's already extremely hard to eliminate. Fungal spores, both in the real world and in Warhammer lore, are remarkably resistant to extreme temperatures, both hot and cold. In fact, fungal spores can survive in the vacuum of space. However, they tend to handle low temperatures much better than high ones. That's why planets infected by orcs are often subjected to exterminatus, the complete and total destruction of a planet's biosphere through various means. But if the orcs are still localized in just one area, then that zone is typically scorched clean using a flammable substance called promethium. In our case, humanity doesn't have a spare planet to escape to. Earth is all we've got, so an exterminatus is off the table. Not to mention, we don't even have the tech for it in the first place, thankfully. What we do have is nuclear weapons, and in place of promethium, we can easily turn to good old-fashioned napalm, which orcs would receive in truly generous quantities. Of course, this wouldn't be great for the environment, but nature does have ways to recover from bombings and wildfires, eventually. But after an exterminatus, there's no saving the planet. If the orcs can't be wiped out while they're still in spore form, and let's be honest, it's highly unlikely we'll be able to, then we're in serious trouble. Why? Because you'd need to know the exact locations of all the spores, and that's practically impossible. Once a colony begins to grow, the orcs develop their own full-scale military system, complete with various specialized types of their species. And as they spread their spores, the infected area gradually undergoes a kind of terraforming, where all native life is replaced by a purely orc-based ecosystem. It's during this process that the large, green-skinned, sharp-toothed creatures we call orcs begin to emerge. Even worse, orcs spread spores both while alive and after death. These spores settle into the ground and can lie dormant for years before eventually sprouting into more orcs. So even if you kill an orc with an RPG, a rifle, or whatever else, its corpse and everything within several meters of it absolutely must be burned. Otherwise, in a few years, that spot will be crawling with orcs again. That's why, at this stage, nuclear strikes, napalm, or heavy flamethrower systems, like the Russian 2S-1 Assault Sepiok, become essential. It's the only way to truly cleanse the area. But how effective would it be to fight orcs without weapons of mass destruction, just to avoid turning half the planet into a scorched wasteland? Honestly, very ineffective and incredibly difficult. An orc has an extremely low pain sensitivity and absolutely no fear, which makes them incredibly resistant to damage. Losing limbs, getting shot in the heart, injuries that would kill a human, none of that really slows them down. And here's the craziest part. Even if you cut off an orc's head, leave it lying around for hours, and then later attach it to another orc body, it'll most likely fuse and come back to life, forming a brand new fighting unit. I believe that only heavy caliber machine guns could inflict truly lethal damage on such a monster. According to Warhammer 40k lore, even then, you'd have to aim for the head or spinal column, and you'd need mass reactive rounds. Essentially small rockets about the size of a large caliber bullet that accelerate after leaving the barrel. These rounds generate far more kinetic energy than conventional gunpowder-based ammo. But even that isn't a guaranteed kill. Besides their damage resistance, orcs possess physical strength that far surpasses human limits. They can literally rip human limbs off with their bare hands. That means their strength is at least on par with the strongest primates on Earth. For context, a chimpanzee can easily tear off a human arm, and a gorilla, which is far stronger than a chimp, is much closer to an orc in size and physique. But if orcs are that tough and strong, maybe we could just isolate them from the outside world, seal them off, and let them starve to death over the course of a few weeks. Unfortunately, starving orcs isn't as easy as it sounds. In fact, it's incredibly difficult. As I mentioned earlier, these creatures are capable of photosynthesis. I couldn't find a detailed breakdown of exactly how orc photosynthesis works, but we can guess based on how it works in plants. An orc would need sunlight, water, and inorganic materials from the soil, which they likely absorb, essentially eating dirt to sustain themselves. This means they can generate energy without having to consume other organisms, making them far harder to starve than any normal life form. So, logically, we can't say for sure how long orcs could sustain their lives using photosynthesis alone, maybe even indefinitely. After all, they travel through space on non-pressurized ships and are capable of colonizing airless planetoids with extremely low gravity. And let's not forget, the temperature of outer space is around -270 degrees Celsius, just 3 degrees above absolute zero, the coldest possible temperature any physical object can have in our universe. Orcs are just unbelievably resilient creatures. They practically spit in the face of physics and somehow don't freeze to death in space. So, maybe we just shouldn't fight them at all? Maybe we could avoid killing them altogether? Could peaceful coexistence be possible? Well, humans might be capable of avoiding war with the orcs, but the orcs aren't capable of avoiding war with us. In the Warhammer 40k universe, the urge to fight is hardwired into their very DNA, placed there by the mysterious ancient beings who created them. On top of that, as I mentioned earlier, knowledge of various professions is encoded in their genes, automatically dividing orc society into castes. For example, mech boys are genetically inclined engineers. Some of them are born already knowing how to build certain machines, and the rest, even if they don't know right away, can instinctively figure it out over time. And honestly, I believe this is entirely possible. It is feasible to embed such skills at the genetic level, as long as we know how to encode them. A good real-world example is birds. Every species of bird knows how to build a nest without ever having seen another bird do it. They skip the observational learning stage entirely and instinctively construct complex structures from birth, like natural-born engineers. And make no mistake, a bird's nest is a very complex engineering structure. Personally, I don't think I'd be able to build a nest out of twigs and fluff that wouldn't fall apart in strong wind, or while the tree it's on sways. Even using artificial materials, I'm not sure I could make one that durable. The same goes for spider webs, especially orb weaver spiders. They don't learn web spinning from anyone. It's entirely genetic. They're born with the instinct to weave geometrically intricate webs, at least intricate by spider standards. I've even heard that some spiders weave decoys of themselves from webbing, so that predators will attack the fake instead of the real spider. I haven't found solid proof of that, but even the idea shows how advanced these instincts can be. How spiders know how to do this is a separate question. The point is, they do. And that's why the genetic aggression and caste-based structure of the orcs isn't all that far-fetched. In fact, it's a fairly realistic concept. But let's get back to the main question of this video. How dangerous would orcs be in the real world? The answer is clear. They would be unimaginably dangerous, not just to humans, but to all life on any planet they invade. They're a threat on the scale of a zombie apocalypse, and just like with zombies, fighting them is extremely difficult, but it's not impossible. There are actually two ways to deal with the orc threat. The first is to respond on a macro scale, using all of humanity's resources. You see, orcs don't just pop into existence overnight. Before full-grown orcs appear, smaller life forms called snotlings and squigs emerge from the spores first. These tiny creatures begin preparing the environment, setting up basic infrastructure so that when the orcs eventually show up, they'll have something to eat and materials to work with. That stage, the very beginning of colonization, is by far the easiest time to wipe them out. Humans would need to locate orc settlements and strike them before they grow too large. But there's one big problem. Orc spores, like many fungi, prefer to reproduce in dark, damp places, meaning forests and caves. That makes it incredibly difficult to detect small colonies in time, especially if they're hidden deep in woodland. As a result, in the course of an all-out war against the orcs, most of Earth's forest could end up destroyed, turning the planet into a lifeless, post-apocalyptic wasteland. The second approach is fighting them on a micro level. Orcs, after all, are an alien organism, completely foreign to Earth's ecosystem, and nature tends to fight back. It's possible that Earth could develop countermeasures on its own, like a type of spore-eating organism that preys on orc spores, or bacteria that attack and kill mature orcs after they emerge from their cocoons. We saw something similar in the 2005 film War of the Worlds. And if such microorganisms don't evolve naturally, We could try to engineer them ourselves. The important thing, though, is to make sure this kind of biological weapon doesn't spiral out of control, because otherwise humanity's clumsy little hands might end up making things even worse. So, if orcs from Warhammer 40,000 ever do appear on Earth, defeating them would be extremely difficult. But with a unified global effort, it just might be possible. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think about this in the comments.